Education Laboratory West. Just continue here. And we're at West Ed. We're really glad you're here and we're excited for today's discussion. I'm here with my colleagues, Frances Reed and Laura Buckner from West Ed, and our partners at the Centers of Excellence for Labor Market Research, Michael Goss and Nora Serenello. Oops. Sorry, just a second. I'm trying to forward the slides and they got kind of stuck here with the, there we go. I think they got stuck when I had to accept the recording. So during our time together, we will first review the findings from our recent study that analyzes the relationship between middle skill occupational supply and demand for all of rural California. Then we're going to dig into the data for the Central Valley Mother Lode-North subregion. And finally, we're going to discuss the landscape shifts we've seen due to COVID-19, some of the barriers to meeting the occupational demand in your area, and hear from each other about strategies for overcoming those barriers. We hope that we'll all come away with new understandings, insights, and strategies, as well as some action plans to collaborate regionally as we strengthen the middle skill workforce. So I mentioned that our work is part of the Regional Education Laboratory West, or REL West, at West Ed. We're one of 10 regional labs in the country funded by the Institute of Educational Sciences at the Department of Education. REL West's goal is to promote the use of data and research evidence to inform policy and practice, and ultimately to improve academic outcomes for students. Now within REL West, this project is part of the California Rural Partnerships Alliance. Over the course of the project, we've provided coaching to several cross-sector rural California consortia to support their use of data to strengthen education and career pathways. And we also conducted the study that we'll discuss today. We're pleased to partner with the Centers of Excellence on this effort. Michael Goss was the key researcher, so I'll turn it over to him to share the study findings with you. Michael's the Centers of Excellence Director of the Inland Empire and Desert. He has over 10 years of labor market work experience, and he also serves on the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Data User Advisory Committee and the Southern California Association of Governments Global Land Use and Economic Council. Thanks for being here, Michael.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Mary, and thank you for having me today. And today I'd like to introduce some work that we did in partnership with REL. So my name is Michael Goss. I'm the director of the Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research, and my area is inland Southern California, and we call it the Inland Empire Desert region, which is Riverside and San Bernardino counties combined. So we have that great area that is very close in the bedroom community for the larger suburbs of Los Angeles, but we also have vast swaths of areas that are considered remote and rural. So let's get into this study. Next slide. Thank you so much. So the goal of this study was to look at the populations of each of these subregion areas. We looked at 4 subregions within California, and we identified them as rural. So we do know that as we look at the data, there has some big changes over the last year. Most notably, while it's not the area that we're discussing today, the southern area that includes Fresno is actually one of the hottest the hottest housing markets in the nation, as people moved out of dense areas and into more rural areas. So we expect to see that in some of the other rural areas as well. The pandemic has shifted people outside those areas. So next slide. So we looked at, thank you so much. So the goal of this study was twofold. We wanted to document the number of middle skill jobs that are within these rural areas that we identified. And we also wanted to document the number of programs that actually can train those types of middle skill jobs so people can be qualified to enter employment. So we looked at, not only did we look at the labor market data, but we also inventoried all the post-secondary programs within the subregion. So the area that we're looking at today is the Central Valley Mother Lode-North, and that's the area that you see on the map with the light blue coloring. And the population in this area was projected to increase by 3.8% over the next few years, adding 65,000 residents. So we wanted to inventory what types of, not only the population, but what types of jobs were available in that area as well. So on the supply side, looking at those post-secondary educational institutions, our main data source was IPEDS. And we looked at all post-secondary institutions in the area. So the Center of Excellence is very focused on the community college side of the program. We also wanted to be more inclusive and look at all federal programs or all post-secondary institutions in the area that receive federal funding. So we looked at all types of degrees and awards within that area. We looked at associate's degrees, which are generally 2 to 4 years of a full-time college work. And then we also looked at post-secondary awards, which are certifications and diplomas. The categories for those were those that are at least 2 years, but less than 4 years, 1 year, but less than 2 years, and then less than 1 year type awards. And one thing to note about IPEDS is that the IPEDS reports the number of credentials that are earned, but it doesn't count the number of students that receive these types of awards. So we get a complete count of the types of number of awards. So looking at the other side of the coin, we wanted to look at demand. What types of occupations are in demand within these areas? And we looked exclusively at middle skill occupations. And what is a middle skill occupation? Middle skill occupations are generally those types of occupations that require more than a high school diploma, but less than a bachelor's degree. And there is a little bit of freedom within there because we know that at a federal level, a job like registered nursing, which is a really big program within the California community college system, typically we see that it needs a bachelor's degree, but that's at a national level. We know in California that employers can accept those types of workers that have a community college level degree, such as an associate's degree. And we also looked at, with the COE, we have a little bit of freedom within the types of occupations that we look at, because we also look at the types of awards that incumbent workers have. So workers that are working in the field, and we pick out those occupations that have a high percentage of workers that have community college level degrees, even if it's typically a high school degree or if it's on the other side of bachelor's degree. So we want to get that middle skill perspective. And we saw that in the the Central Valley Mother Lode-North, we saw that 36% of all jobs were middle skill type jobs. And then we also looked at the annual job openings. So annual job openings is a count of the number of jobs that are available because a job may be growing because there's just more need for those types of jobs. There's more employers, they need more types of workers, but also the count of jobs that are in replacement. So people retire, they transfer to another job, such as they get a promotion, or they may transfer outside the area and it creates more job openings. So job openings is the combination of new job growth and replacement need. And then we looked at the earnings. So we looked at all levels of earnings, all the way from the 25th percentile, which in the report we called an entry-level wage, assuming that when people enter an occupation, they start at the low end of the scale. We did a median, which is 50th percentile, and then a 75th percentile, which is on the higher end of the scale, meaning that at least 75% of the workers make that wage. And we call that experience wage, just assuming that is the longer you work in an occupation, the more you'll earn over time. And then we looked at the MIT living wage calculator that provides a standard base living wage that to live in each county. And for these areas that are comprised of multiple counties, we provided the wage for the highest county in that area. So we put it all together and we looked at the projected number of annual job openings. We looked at the growth, the wage range, and we looked at the number of middle skill credentials that were provided for each of these occupations. And then we looked at the difference between the number of annual job openings and the credentials provided for those occupations to give us some idea, to map, to inventory what this universe looks like. How are we providing the types of training for the job demand, and what type of programs do we have in the area? that gives us some foundational knowledge of where we should put our resources going forward. So what we found overall, when we looked at all 4 regions combined, we found that 70% of middle skill occupations in the region were projected to have positive job growth, meaning that they were expected to expand over time. And then we also found that 79% of all middle skill jobs provided a living wage. So that was above the MIT living wage standard for the area. And then overall, we found that there were about 84,000 middle skill job openings over the next 3 years for this projection time that we looked at. And then we found that there were only 20,000 credentials being awarded to meet the demand for those occupations. So what we found is a pretty big gap in the number of annual job openings and the number of credentials that were awarded. So one thing to keep in mind about these types of disparities between the number of annual job openings and credentials is that people do move within these regions. They may travel, they may live in the rural areas and travel to a more urban area to earn a higher wage, or there may be just more job availability. Inversely, you may have workers from those areas also traveling this area. So, but what we found overall is that that there was this supply gap when we look at the total area, the number of annual job openings that we expected, and the number of awards that were conferred by institutions within the region.
So thanks everyone, and welcome back. And so now we're going to dig a little bit more into the study findings for this specific subregion. Michael, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Mary. So I hope you guys ever had a good time meeting everybody in your group chats. So for the Central Valley Mother Lode-North, we, first of all, to define rural, we use the Federal Office of Management Bureau for rural definitions. So we wanted to define what counties are rural within California. So that's how we identified all the rural counties that we looked at throughout this whole study. And then we looked at, to break up into these 4 subregions, so particularly this Central Valley Mother Lode subregion, we wanted some on-the-ground knowledge to understand how the economies work within these areas. So we touched base with the University of Pacific, their Center for Business and Policy, and we also touched base with my former colleagues at the EDD Labor Market Information Division on the best way to split out these regions. So for the Central Valley Mother Lode-North, we came up with these 8 counties that you see here listed: Amador, Alpine, Calaveras, Mariposa, Merced, San Joaquin, Standing Solace, and Tuolumne, sorry. And then we know within these areas that we have 2 fairly large cities by rural standards, Modesto and the Stockton area. Next slide. So what we found within the area is that 79% of the middle skill occupations were expected to have positive growth within the area. And that's slightly higher than when we looked at all 4 rural regions combined at 77%. And then we also found that 94% were earned a living wage within the area. And that's just a little bit higher than the overall look when we looked at all 4 regions of the state as well. Then when we looked at the MIT living wage standard, then the living wage was $11.65 an hour. And I know that's a low wage, but that's what they display for a single adult time. And what that wage includes, it includes the very basic living standards. It is literally the fine line between the working poor and needing government assistance. So that's really what it does not include any vacation. It does not include going out to restaurants. It does not include any kind of savings whatsoever. It is very basic at that time. So now when we looked at it again in 2020, it looks like they updated their methodology since then, and now they say that the wage is $16.26 an hour, which is a little bit more in line with what we kind of expect for that area. The key findings that we found, so we found that over that 3-year projection period, we found that there was going to be just over 26,000 job openings over the next few years. And then, but what we also found was that there was only 4,600 credentials being awarded during that time. So that's basically a ratio of 1 in 5. So only 1/5 of the jobs were being addressed by any kind of credentials, which indicates that there's a good opportunity to look and see what types of occupations are within the area, what type of programs you have, and potentially discuss, especially hitting those occupations that are high growth, and also pay that wage that would allow a student to become self-sustainable after exiting a program. So looking at the finer detail, we looked at, these are just the top 10 occupations based on that supply demand analysis. So number one is heavy tractor trailer truck drivers. We actually see that in my region as well, down in Southern California. We have a lot of storage for the LA ports, and it's because we have a lot of empty land. They were able to build these big warehouses where they need trucks to go back and forth. So we saw high demand for that tractor trailer drivers pretty much in every rural area of California. You can proceed. So just filling in the data, this is what it looks like. There were about almost 1,800 annual job openings for heavy tractor trailer truck drivers, but we didn't see any institutions reporting to IPEDS that had any new programs whatsoever. So that's an occupation to look at, and it's also opens discussion. Is it worth creating this type of program? So you have to understand what it costs to buy one of these trucks, to store the truck, to maintain the truck, insure the truck, and also there's a lot that goes into that decision, like if we should build this program. So it's worth exploring, but at least we're noting that there is high demand for this occupation. It's middle skill, it pays a decent wage, and there's no programs within the area. So what this table basically shows is that gap in difference between the annual job openings and the number of credentials that we were seeing awarded during that period. And the next column here shows the entry-level wage. So this is the 25th percentile earnings column. And what that actually shows is, back up more, there we go. What that's actually showing is the 25th percentile wage, meaning that is what you can expect to earn probably at an entry level when you enter the occupation. It means that 75% of the workers within that occupation are making more than that hourly wage. And what we have here is we're highlighting in green the hourly wage that exceeds that living wage standard that was available when we did the study at $11.65 an hour. So we see that many of the occupations—
Michael, can I stop you for a second? Tammy has a question about defining the credential. She wanted to know if that was also dealing with third-party certification.
That includes all reported awards to IPEDS. So if somebody earns a Microsoft credential, if they don't report to IPEDS, then it would not show that.
Thanks so much, Tammy, for adding your question to the chat. And if possible, we'll just wait and answer all the questions after Michael goes through. This is the last slide. Oh no, there's one more slide, and then we can go through all the questions. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Now it's actually very important to note that this study was done before the pandemic. So we do know that a lot has changed in the last year or so. So, we didn't want to leave you hanging. This was a great study because it gave us the opportunity to inventory the demand and the supply within the area. So we actually went back to these top 10 and we wanted to show you what the labor market looks like now. So what we see is we looked at a newer data set, and it does include that actually the second quarter of 2020. So it does include a little bit of that pandemic look and the change of occupations. So what you see, the first number is actually the annual job openings for, let's just talk about heavy tractor trailer truck drivers, number one here. Just under 1,900 annual job openings. And we saw the difference when we saw back when we did the study about in early 2019, we saw a difference of 85 more job openings than in 2019. We still saw no credentials. We went back into IPEDS, got the latest data set from IPEDS. We still saw no credentials for this occupation, and we still have that gap. We also there was also updated wages as well. So we see now that this wage, the entry level wage for tractor truck drivers, is now $16.78 an hour, which is a boost of 82 cents an hour, what we saw in early 2019. On the other side, we also looked back at the MIT living wage again, and we noted that they had that change in methodology where they really boosted that single adult wage. So it bumped up by $4.61 to $16.26 an hour. which is a little more realistic to what it actually costs to live in these areas. And I do know that is very low wage, but it boosts up a little more than that $11 that we looked at originally. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you guys today and sharing the findings of the report. The report findings, Mary might go over there again, but the report's findings can be found on the federal, help me out, Mary, where's it at?
It's in a couple places, and we'll make sure to share that with everybody after. It's also on the pre-work. And so
Great.
now, Francis, do you want to facilitate any Q&A?
Yeah, sure. I see one couple questions popped up in the chat for Michael. What are they considering a credential for a retail sales worker?
It relates to that's actually a really question. So what we did is we used the ONET, it's called the SOC, which is how we study occupation, Standard Occupational Classification, to SIP, Classification Instructional Program. So ONET has developed a federal resource that links the occupation and the training program together. So we can see what type of training program, what type of SIP training program leads to a certain type of occupation. And they have this classification for every post-secondary occupation available. So for this study, we used the ONET SIP SOC translation for the programs.
And then related, what is a credential for a customer service rep?
What is the type of credential?
Yeah, I think that is maybe Andrea could hop on and ask the question if you want to. Mm-hmm. Like what credential do you need for being a customer service rep?
I mean, I can tell you in the most basic sense, and this is true for pretty much all occupations. Once you get into the private sector, it's whatever the employer wants, to be perfectly honest. If an employer wants to hire somebody that only has a high school diploma, which would normally need a bachelor's degree, if there's not some kind of law or certification that they have to have, there's nothing to stop an employer from hiring anybody with any level of credential. What we do see is we see a typical entry-level education occupation. And that survey comes from a survey of employers who say, what type of level of education do you need for this type of occupation? So it presents the most typical. And then we also can look at the current population survey, which looks at the entire population of workers within a certain occupation and what level of education that they hold. So it's the incumbent worker.
And does anyone else just want to unmute yourself if you had a question about Michael's data?
I do. I'm sorry. As I had mentioned in the little room that we were in for a while, some of the information seems to dovetail with the reports that I get from EDD. Mm-hmm. And when I look at in-demand middle skill occupations for our region, it's defining a middle school occupation requires either some college, post-secondary, the definition. Mm-hmm. So basically, these are jobs students would be able to get after a high school diploma, although it looks like being customer service or some of these other jobs don't require any special credentialing. So high school kids could obviously get jobs in middle skill occupations.
At the individual level, I don't want to create confusion, but like in the reality if there is not some kind of barrier or credential that forces you, like something like nursing is a great example. You have to have a nursing credential you have to be board certified to be a nurse. So if there's not that barrier, the employers are really free to do whatever they want. But what we see with a customer service representative, this is not just the customer service representative that you talk to at Target. These are usually customer service representatives that are usually specialized in certain types of industries. So it does require a good level of training, and probably typically does require some college to enter the occupation.
Does that make sense to you, Tammy? Great. Because I thought it was pretty confusing when I first understood the SIP to SOC relationship, because I thought, well, how do we know? And the bottom line is it's aggregated and it's what industry folks report.
Yeah, so what I'll tell anybody as well too, like how many people are working in our field of study? Raise your hand. I saw Mary. Okay. Yeah, it's whatever it in the reality in the real world, it's whatever an employer accepts. And that nursing example is great because if you do take a nursing program, you probably are going to be a nurse. You're very specialized. But if you take some kind of business course, the world opens up to you. If you take communications, the world opens up to you on what you can do. And that's just the reality of it. But what we do know is that for certain occupations, they do have a typical entry-level education requirement level, and that's reported by employers. And then again, we can look at also the current population survey, and we can see what type of level of education that certain occupations have.
Do we have anyone else that wanted to hop on with a question?
Michael, do you want to introduce your colleague and we can move on to the next section?
Absolutely. Thank you again, everybody, so much for your time. Now I'd like to introduce my colleagues at the Center of Excellence who represent Nora Saranello. She represents the Central Valley Mother Lode region, and also Sarah. She represents the northern half of California. So yeah, I'd like to turn it over to them. They provide some more of the great research that they're doing in your local area.
Thank you, Michael, so much for the introduction. And yes, I am the director for the Central Valley Mother Lode Center of Excellence. I am hosted at Modesto Junior College. And as Michael has demonstrated, the COE directors are considered very experienced in having expertise in the field of labor market research. Our primary function as the COE is to provide quality labor market data and information to help community colleges respond to the workforce needs. We provide labor market reports to help align programs with employer KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and many other types of LMI reports. And I'm going to stop myself right there. Two things very important. The first is that I tend to talk quickly, so feel free to ask me to stop, restate, or slow down. And the second is, as many researchers, I tend to use acronyms. So if I use one that doesn't make any sense, please stop me and ask to define. And Michael already mentioned the CPS. In the world of health, CPS generally means Child Protective Services. In the world of the Centers of Excellence, it means the Community Population Survey. So in any case, it's really important to understand, the current population survey. It's important to understand what an acronym means and ask me to define it if I'm not clear. Additionally, the Centers of Excellence also provide on-call data support for a variety of reasons to support community college in statewide program investments and other grant opportunities. We facilitate workshops. We collaborate in the development of data tools and dashboards, ultimately to try to make accessing LMI data, that's labor market information, easier for all of our constituencies. And we also serve as research advisors to local and regional educational institutions, workforce agencies, and other community partners within our regions across the state of California. I apologize, you cannot see my face. I'm waiting on a new computer system that has a camera so that people can begin seeing me again because my other system quit functioning. So I apologize for that. A little bit about our region. The CVML, Central Valley Mother Lode region, is the largest region in the state, covering 56,000 square miles. It's a 15-county region that runs at the northern boundary, Alpine, Amador counties, down the Sierra Nevada mountain range to our west, to the Tehachapis, transverses across Kern and Tulare counties over to the Diablo mountain range, which is our western boundary, all the way up through the San Joaquin, all the way up through San Joaquin County. And I just say we have a wonderful region. I'm proud to be a part of it, and I'm happy and dedicated to being a support mechanism and a conduit to upward social and economic mobility and contribute to the general well-being to all the people in our community. And at that point, I want to acknowledge the COE acknowledges and understands that there are differences between the economies of the valley floor and that of the mother lode, as well as the differences between the northern and southern portions of this very vast region. And it's the questions that we are going to pursue directly on the slides are really important and valuable feedback. We really need the boots on the ground feedback of what you're seeing and experiencing as a result of the COVID-19, whether you think that these changes that have transpired are permanent or temporary, and what you're actually seeing and experiencing, as I said, in terms of jobs, wages, perhaps business closures, reopenings, replacements of the same businesses, or even different types of businesses. And more, really importantly, what are you seeing and experiencing in the terms of meeting workers? And we focus on middle skill workers, but I would want to hear about workers in general, what you're seeing and hearing, both currently and what you think in the foreseeable future. And so we roll back to the slides. Do we think the changes will be permanent? Does anyone want to provide some feedback? We'd love that. Wow, we have a really quiet group today.
Thank you so much, Nora. So as she said, we've got kind of two questions. One, what are you seeing? You know, how has COVID impacted occupational demand in your region, subregion? And then also, do you think these changes are going to stick?
Hello, this is Pedro from Modesto Junior College. Some of the information that I've heard in the community or from industry members is that the current climate is we're not finding or the industry is not finding the level of entry-level workers to meet the current demands now. Some may be connected to some of the stimulus packages and the benefits as people are back are at home and or working remotely and or claiming unemployment. So I think that that's one of the things that we're seeing within the pandemic. Within the actual environment of the pandemic, I think the presence of remote work in particular sections of the economy are going to change occupations moving forward. How that remains to specifically be seen. But I think that in particular, there are office-oriented jobs that as the longer we stay in this kind of pseudo-remote working environment, systems are being put in place where folks can work remotely and systems can be accessed remotely to do business remotely. So I think to some degree that'll have longstanding impacts. As a member that works in post-secondary education, trying to find what that balance is for preparation of students and workers for the future is going to be the big pivot.
I'd like to piggyback on what Pedro said, and I'm not as aware of it in the North Valley, but in the South Valley, there's a real estate boom, and it is believed to be driven by folks from the Los Angeles area realizing that they can afford more house and telecommute from Kern County and South Valley locations. And so that's going to be a new economic driver, bringing income into the area for employment that's outside of the area without a commute. And so that's going to impact our service industries in ways I don't know that are easy to measure. I mean, we're going to need more healthcare and retail and restaurants and things that residents need. But the intellectual capital and work product is going to be going to companies based elsewhere. Now, what it might mean is it might make it easier for those companies to relocate into the Valley altogether once they realize their workforce is here.
This is Andrea. I mean, I don't have any evidence. I only have anecdotal thoughts about what's going on. Salaries are also being driven up for positions that are at the big box stores. And I have a feeling that's going to continue to impact small business as they try and compete. To be able to hire people, you have to have a competitive wage now. And so that's a struggle for a lot of businesses. And then also the schools, the local school districts, as far as K through 12, have a big influx of money right now that they've been given. So I'm wondering if they're going to try and attract more people and trying to get more people into the educational world in order to support the students that have fallen behind the last year working or, being at home for their education.
This is Tammy from Turlock Unified, and I'm the CTE director. That's very, very true. Based on some of the funds coming down from the government, there's going to be quite a few hires in the area of paraprofessionals like we've never seen before. There was a time when we kind of steered away from that, and we really wanted just the teachers to be in full command and really do everything themselves in the classroom. Well, we're realizing with the differentiation that is needed, especially now, we're going to have a lot of paras. There'll be more counselors being hired. We're going to have one now at every elementary school, which is new, and mental health clinicians. So there'll be a rise in those occupations. I anticipate not just here, but throughout the United States.
We had an interesting question posted from Elena from San Joaquin County in the chat. She was wondering, how will the closure of big box stores like Sears and JCPenney impact entry-level jobs for youth? They're stuck in food places and customer service related jobs right now. I'm wondering if anybody is thinking about big box stores in their region.
I think one of the things though is like we have two new box. In-N-Out isn't necessarily a box store, but it's a big chain restaurant being open. Another one being opened up in Stockton, and they're advertising their wages at $17 an hour, which is amazing. And then there's another place, I don't know if Elena or Patty in Stockton, that's opening up on the corner of March and Pacific. And I've been trying to figure out what kind of store it is because I hadn't heard of the name of the store before. But
there's also something new, there's also something new that is popping up right there in front of Target. Is that what you're?
Yes,
that what
that's
you're
what I'm referring to. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what it is either, Andrea. This is Patty. I didn't recognize the name.
I keep driving by, looking at the name and then thinking, I got to Google that when I get back to the office, and then I forget what it's called.
Well, I'll speak to the, you know, there's these closures, but we also have, and Pedro can really provide more information because he has a relationship with the Amazon facilities and the need that they have, not for you know, just entry level people to support packing boxes and getting things ready to ship, but Delta College and I believe Modesto both have programs, advanced programs, so that students can, you know, if they work there as a high school student, that if they take some community college courses, they can advance up into management. Pedro, if you want to speak to that at all, please do.
Sure, Nora. Thank you. You know, I think there are logistics and warehousing programs that both Modesto and Delta College have. The enrollment numbers we've been struggling with, despite the fact that particularly the supply chain management program is completely online. And I think part of what is driving that for adults is just trying to balance managing their home life during the pandemic and then the opportunities to go to work. So when we look at that particular industry, I think not only nationwide, but statewide, has been expanding quite a bit. And as we start talking about box stores, I'm not sure how the connection point between distribution centers and people purchasing online and going to getting on their vehicle and going to stores is going to actually pan out as we move forward as consumers in the future, because frankly, ordering online is becoming so easy to do that that's part of what's also feeding the entire distribution center and the products being dropped off on your porch at home. When I look at the wage structures for those entry-level jobs, whether they're manufacturing facilities or warehouse facilities, I wonder how the impact of an entry-level job at, I'll say McDonald's or Jack in the Box or any fast food being at about 15, 16. If you're at In-N-Out, is now upwards of about $18 an hour. How that compares to attracting people to go to work for facilities, and how that plays into it. So there's a lot of moving parts in terms of what's shifting, and how do a variety of different employers, whether they're small employers staying competitive, large chains staying competitive, then within the industry staying competitive, it's to attract the talent. We find that there seems to be, at least in the field that I'm overseeing, which is the industrial arts and the public safety program, but particularly the industrial arts, there seems to be more requests for employees and professionals than what we can supply. And we seem to have challenges with students and adults applying for those positions, despite the fact that I believe that in some cases they offer some very competitive packages. But you know, that again, as I'm looking at what's happening out in the current market, there's a lot of shifts with how particular industries are growing, and there are some shifts with how retail and hospitality is being challenged right now, particularly if you're a smaller employer. I was at a local WIOA board presentation a couple of weeks ago, where we did a evaluation of the number of employers we had in Stanislaus County. And by and large, the vast majority of employers in the county hired under 30 employees. So, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me now, but the large box chain or large employers in our area, the Foster Farms, the Gala Wineries, the big names that we normally see in our area, while they hire a large volume of employees into our county, when you looked at the aggregate, didn't represent where most employees were being hired from. Most were smaller employers. So the question becomes to me, what are we doing to work with smaller employers and mid-sized employers that don't have the capacities to pivot? And they may have the opportunity for growth, particularly during this very robust or unpredictable economy.
I'm just
And I would
quickly
say
interrupting
that
here to say that there's about 2 minutes left for discussion, and then Nora will have to go to breakouts.
I just wanted to say that what Pedro was talking about is happening as well in our area in the construction industry. Just his points and discussion could be applied directly to that area as well.
So I'll share some quick data real quick. In Stanislaus County, we have 21,000 businesses, and these are average numbers from my notes, 177,000 employees. 56 of the businesses hire 1 or 2 employees. 39% of the businesses hire under 25. 3% of our businesses hire between 26 to 50 employees. And 2% of our businesses hire above 50 employees, a total of 503 businesses in Stanislaus County. So while we talk about what's the industry doing, some of the makeup within the structure of the size of our employers, and I think in the region, being cognizant of where is the vast majority. So nearly 90% of our businesses hire 25 or less employees in our industry, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Thank you, everyone, for providing your insights and experiences about the impact of COVID-19, at least as we know so far. The rest is definitely to be determined. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your participation in your breakout groups. And now Nora's going to lead us in a discussion about some of the insights that we had during the discussion, and questions and maybe some strategies that we can share about how to shrink the gap between supply and demand. So Nora, do you want to take it from here?
Can you hear me, Mary?
I can, thank you.
Okay, I keep getting muted out, so I don't, I think I'm in and I'm not. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me?
I would like, I hear someone.
Paul, yes, we can hear you. So let's get Nora to sort of start the conversation, and then I know Paul's eager to share a great strategy.
Okay, and so yeah, I want to hear from the other groups. That was exactly my point. Let's start. What group were you in, Paul?
Well, I was in your group, but I could hear you, but I didn't know how to fix my mute. You couldn't.
Yeah, so it's, he was in group 3 with me.
And can you see me now?
Yes, we can, Paul. We can see you and hear you, so we're in great shape.
Well, when Nora's ready, I'll tell her about a strategy that she knows.
Go right ahead. You're in.
Okay. So I'm a retired business development person, been working with the schools, including Pedro Mendez in the Mother Lode area. I'm in Calaveras, and I have a partner who's a former retired educator, superintendent of schools. And we're working together, raising money. And we have a significant amount already from Dignity Mark Twain. And we're leveraging what has been accomplished before I was on the scene by Calaveras High has for over a decade been graduating seniors with medical science. And most of them are going into the health industry. And we're talking about so-called allied skills, radiation, nursing, practical nursing, all the things that medical assistants and so forth. These are skills that pay well, can make a living, and that what you're talking about in terms of the demand, there's super big demand for these kind of people in the Mother Lode area, not just in the Calaveras area. But what I would say the strategy for what is needed by other schools, and we're working to get money to help other schools. So far, like I said, we've been graduating 50 to 60 students a year. Starting next year with the money we have, we're going to be doing with sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And then that 22 will be moving down to middle school, exploring with kids about the opportunities in health, healthcare. Again, non-physician, non-specialist, but well-paid allied occupations within the health industry. And so I guess in summary, I would say until we get more schools enabling students in their at least sophomore, junior, and senior year to get skills, hands-on skills, and we have that at Calaveras High, we won't address this gap adequately. And I also mentioned, and I think Nora, you're aware of this, California, the largest state in the country, has a crisis in health because we have rural areas, we have areas where the age groups are averaging over 50 already, and where they're going, they need more help. So the state is aware of this. They're spending money, and spending in the next 10 years, they'll spend $10 billion to help address this problem. And while a lot of it is in surgery and physicians, it's very significant of having what's called allied function and occupation skills. And that's what my other retired partner and I are doing with the help of the, we're part of the workforce in the Calaveras school system. And we're working with the superintendents, and we have a colloquial relationship with the junior colleges, including Pedro, Delta, and Columbia, and other schools. We said, I've raised over $200,000 for scholarships, not just for health, because I've been working in CTE for 10 years. Again, retired, but I'm focused on health right now. And that's all I have to say for now.
Okay, is there any other feedback from any of the other groups? Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and just throw some things out that the Centers of Excellence has been looking at as what we're looking at to address beyond what happened. Well, it incorporates what's happened with COVID, but again, we did expect to become more technologically based. It just happened happened way quicker than we had anticipated. And so in saying that, we are recognizing an increased need by employers for technological certifications, a variety of technological certifications, whether it be a Microsoft mastery, something, whether it's software or hardware based. I mean, being able to manage Zoom is a skill in and of itself. Also, the increased use of artificial intelligence and automation for routinized tasks that are routine. Do these two elements together or individually pose threats or benefits to the workforce? We're looking at it that it's actually might be highly beneficial, but again, we're going to need people who are going to be able to interact with these types of intelligences or automated technologies, which is they're technologies, and we're going to have to be able to interact with them and perhaps program them. I will caveat that automation remains costly, especially in terms of maintenance. We definitely need increase for social competency, equity and diversity competency, mental health competency. Paul really hit on the growing need for affordable health care in light of the gray tsunami, is what we call it. We need to address the infrastructure to address future pandemics. We'd be foolish to think this is the one and only. No, we need to be prepared for this in terms of infrastructure in the coming years. We're also in the process of transitioning from a community policing society to more of what I call a community society that focuses more on community healthcare, focusing on the need, again, for competencies in addressing mental health and equity and diversity issues within our communities, as opposed to treating folks, just having the police handle them, and actually educating our public safety officials in the need for them to be thoughtful about who our communities are. Not that they're not. We just know that we're moving this direction. We all could use benefit from gaining in competency of understanding people and the increased need for mental health care. And this is a COVID impact, but it's also just an element, a dynamic of society in general. And then changes in our general infrastructure. We need better, more efficient technology for telecommuting, which is going to need a workforce to work on that. Increased use of automation in transportation. What's that going to look like? Whether it be a train or trucks going down a highway. I would like it to have its own lane and not be on 99 next to me in case there's an incident. But, we need to think about these things. Then also, very importantly, hot topic, green economy and green jobs. In our areas, we're thinking about environmental restoration and preservation. How are we using our land? How are we using our water? Are we growing smart? Thinking about that Central Valley is the breadbasket of the world. What are we going to do if we, build all over it? We want to be thoughtful about how we expand, and what we put into our land goes into our water. And then an important factor that both we share with Sarah's region is fire mitigation. Mother lode, very important. How are we mitigating these fires? How are we managing the resource on the ground? And how are we interacting with PG&E and what they're doing to address, fire mitigation? What's that going to look like in the future? Those are just some of the things that the Centers of Excellence are thinking about as a team, as a state team, and individually within our regions. Just wanted to put that out there. And Janice, I'm not sure if you're still on the line, but if you are, anything you want to say about what the region is doing? I think she might have had to jump off.
No, I'm here, Nora. Thank you guys for joining in today. A lot of the things that we are looking at our region and starting to have the conversation, like Nora had mentioned, is what's going to be the impact of COVID, especially with these different parts of the region. And how do we align these pathway programs with our K-12 and community colleges? But to also, how do we better have employer engagements involved so that we can understand the skill levels that are desired, so that we get those in front of students, in front of facilitators and administration as well. So that's some of the things that we're working on. I know that we have much more ideas and we have a lot of creative energy. So I'm kind of curious to see and excited to see what we're going to be developing in the near future.
Thank you, Janice. Well, I know that we're going to be wrapping up, and I would like to continue this conversation. And please, I'm going to gather everyone's information who participated in this call, and Janice and I will talk, and I will be reaching out to you in the next few weeks to see if we can put some more conversations together, if you all are interested. I think it's really important we continue these conversations and working together so that we can really support the social and economic well-being of our communities. Thank you so much for all of your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, slide is just sharing some of the references that were, the information shared today was based on. I know that these slides will be shared out after, so you can go ahead and look back at those if you'd like to. Francis also just put a link in the chat to a survey that we would really appreciate you take just 2 minutes to take. It helps us plan for future learning opportunities such as this one. I do want to also note that we've been recording this session. Several people contacted us prior to it beginning, saying that they had a conflict, and so we'll be preparing the recording. It takes a couple of weeks. There's a few accessibility elements that we need to add, but we will be sharing this. I'll actually go ahead and stop recording.